What's up, everyone, and welcome to the second art discussion about art and creativity. Today, I'm gonna talk about some very fundamental stuff. We're talking about values. We're talking about values. What are values? What is a value? How do I get a value? Basically, values are how light or dark something is. Generally, people think of a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the darkest dark, and 10 being the lightest light. And everything in between there is the spectrum within which we operate. So the word values comes up a lot. Why? Because it's very important. Anything we see in front of us, or anything that we wish to create ourselves, is a series of values and colors. Values are basically your light in your painting. There's more to light than values, but value has a huge amount of power in an image. So it's within everyone's benefit to understand them and control them as well as possible. So an important thing to understand about values is they are relative. A value is not necessarily light or dark. It is relative to its environment. Cue cut to Photoshop. So if we have a pure white value 10 canvas, and we put down a mark on it, it looks like a much darker value. But then when we put down an even darker value, that first one we put down is now the lighter value, and our perception of it has changed based on the new value. Now that's important. The perception of values is changed by surrounding values. Again, there is no right or wrong way to do anything in art. These are all ideas, but here's an example. If we start an image from a pure white background like this, everything we put down is going to seem darker. If we start on a pure black, everything is going to feel lighter. And we're starting with our darkest dark, and we're building up from there. And that's going to affect our perception as well of the values, and we're probably going to think that values that are technically maybe a 5 or a 6 on the scale are quite light. And if you put a 10 on there, it's going to look, crazy. So understanding that values are relative to each other and your perception of values are affected by the other values in its environment are important. So there's no right or wrong way to build up an image. Every way has its own pros and cons. Here are a couple ways to try building up an image. So if this is your scale of 1 to 10, and this is your full value range, most paintings are within this range around here. This is your midtones, and then the darkest dark and the lightest light, these are like little accents that you use sparingly to kind of accent the image. You don't want to be going crazy with those, otherwise if the whole image uses the whole scale, there's not really a hierarchy of what's more important, where's the focus, So let's say you've managed to lay a foundation with this range in here of the whole scale for your image, and now you have your focal point, and now you have this extra range of value that you can use to pull focus or detract focus or whatever, wherever you want it within an image, because you've been sparing with your values, and now you can play with the rest where you want to. Another way that you can be aware of your values is keying your image at the beginning. This requires a little bit of forethought. You'll need to know what your darkest dark and lightest light in the image will be beforehand. Let's say you have a portrait, and there's a point in the focal area of the face in the shadow that's going to be the absolutely darkest point in the image, and nothing else is going to be as dark as that, your darkest accent. And then there's maybe the highlight on the forehead, your lightest light, and nothing else is going to be as light as this. So then everything else in the image has to be between these two values, your darkest dark here and your lightest light here. So now you've given yourself your parameters. This is as dark as the image is getting, this is as light as it's getting, and everything else has to be here. So that's another way you can help yourself to see your values relative to what is actually going to be the darkest point in the image. You might be putting things down that seem dark, you know, on like a piece of paper, but then when you see it next to what you actually have planned as your darkest dark, you realize it's actually quite light and you can go much darker. There's lots of ways to see values and think about values to help yourself control this scale, but the biggest thing, of course, is practice. So as long as you're aware of your values and you're constantly judging, comparing, and you keep practicing your control of that, your values will get better. So something else I'd like to talk about is high key and low key images. So this is to do with the value range used in paintings. So a low key image, if this is the whole scale, we'll use kind of this half here. And a high key image, we'll use, you know, this half here. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but you get the idea. These things work because the same way that you can control your values within the mid-range, you have enough values here to do the same thing. They're still relative to each other, just down a notch on the scale. So when you start messing with the value range that you're using in a painting, you can start messing with the mood of an image, with the use of values, stuff like that. So it's good to challenge yourself to use these different ranges and be able to mess with values in all these different ways. So here is a low-key and a high-key image, just for context. So the low-key one, the lightest value I have in there is about a 3. So my lightest light in that image is a 3 out of 10. But the image still reads within the context of that image because, you know, the darks go so dark. We get that feeling of light because it's that much lighter than the darks, which are the absolute max darkest you can go. And the high key image, my lightest lights, they're like the road in the back where it's just sunburnt white, that's just a 10. And most of the shadows are about a 3, which is the lightest value in the low key image. They both work, they both read. They're just using different value ranges and they have different feels. So you don't have to use the whole scale, you don't have to use the same part of the scale. Play with values, experiment with values, fail, succeed, and just learn what you can do with them. So there's one more thing I want to talk about. Michael Mako asks, hey Sean, how did you learn to see values right within colored world? So pretty much everyone agrees that value is king in an image. It has the largest power in an image to just kind of, you know, control what's going on, so it's important for us to be able to control values. Some people do this thing where they'll be creating a color image and then they will turn it grayscale to check the values, you know, isolated, black and white, and how they're doing, and then switch it back to color and continue with their image. So people do that because colors affect how you perceive the values. So they want to be able to see the values isolated and change them there. So for that same reason that they do affect our final perception of the image and the values, I think we should work them together, because the final image is not a black and white image of pure values. It's an image with colors that are affecting your perception of values. Again, I'm not saying this is the correct thing to do or whatever, this is just my thoughts on the subject. So let's say you have two values next to each other, and if you were doing them black and white, you would feel maybe that this one would have to be a 4 and this one would have to be a 5. But let's say this one's red and this one's blue now. They create a lot of separation with that alone. So maybe the values don't have to be so far apart. Maybe it can be a 4.5 and a 4.8 even. And their color differences with that slight value shift creates enough of a difference for that part of the image for what you want. So we can use colors to help restrict our value range even further, so that we have like I said earlier, about more play to use our values where they matter. So that's just one way that color can affect an image, and I think the link between color and value shouldn't be so separated. So that's it for this video. I hope this was useful. If you learned something, drop a comment and let me know what you learned. If you like this video, please give it a share. It really helps me, and that's how this page will grow and we'll be able to do more. Until next time, stay thoughtful, keep practicing. I'll see you next time. Bye.